This is the Steam charts for Apex Legends, a very popular PvP FPS game that even just the Steam numbers are pretty good. And if you look at the lifetime charts, it's actually gotten better. There's a strange dip right here though, because while currently there's about 200,000-ish players playing Apex, just a few months ago that was about 100 to 200,000 more consistently, with that substantial peak in 2023 reaching over 600,000. Clearly, I'm not talking about a dead game here. It's still extremely popular even if it is in a bit of a lull right now. And just remember, this game is also on consoles, and you can also get it through EA's dedicated launcher, thus bypassing the Steam charts altogether. So I want to make a clarification about what I said with Apex having their player count drop. Apparently the new battle pass system is just making people quit the game, which, yeah, it makes sense that Apex would finally do something to make people actually quit. Apparently cheaters is not enough. You have to just squeeze people out of more money. But this point is not exactly relevant for most of the video, but this is some more context about the start. Also, I tried to record some X-Defiant footage for this video, and for whatever reason, GeForce Experience is just not working for that specific game. It's picky about what games it wants to work on sometimes, so I will have footage of whatever game I can record, even if it's not relevant to the video at all. So I will try to have some kind of background gameplay footage to keep some of your minds preoccupied. Anyway, back to the video. But over the past few months, I have seen a lot of the influencers in Apex Legends basically quit the game with no intention of ever returning. Almost unanimously, the reason for these streamers quitting is because of cheaters. So while you probably watch some mediocre X-Defiant gameplay in the background, in today's video I'm going to go over what is effectively an opinion piece on why I think PvP games are effectively dying out. And I just showed a counterpoint with the Steam charts, clearly showing that PvP games are still very popular, and Apex is not even the most popular one, it just so happens to be one I used to play. But if a game like Apex Legends is still so incredibly popular, why are streamers quitting? Which, by the way, a lot of these people quit before that dip you saw in the Steam charts. So where I think this problem generally started is maybe about 10 or so years ago, and I'll use a story to illustrate this point. I used to play Smash Bros competitively, so I would actually go to physical tournaments. Granted, it was just in the local area, I didn't go out of state or anything. But I did play during the entirety of Smash 4's life cycle, which is the Wii U game. And I did play a little bit of Ultimate. I showed up at some of the early tournaments for that as well. And I was actually fairly decent. I made it on the power rankings at least once. I think I was an honorable mention the second time, because as competition heated up, my character choice was starting to show its flaws. See, I mained Pac-Man in Smash 4, and for those who don't understand the meta of Smash 4, Pac-Man was like a C or D tier. Like, he was pretty bad. But that was my main because I thought it was a fun character to play. A lot of the other ones felt kind of dull, I guess. But I do remember a tournament that I went to, where I was matched up with one of the better players from the other college, because of course there would be a college rivalry among the Smash Bros community. I was affiliated with one college, even though I wasn't actually attending it yet. But this person I was matched against was from the other college, and they were one of the better players there. Apparently played a lot of Melee. Smash 4 was my first Smash Bros game, okay? Just to give you some context there. So I'm playing against someone that has a lot more experience with Smash Bros than me. Also playing a much better character. They were playing Meta Knight, and that was before Meta Knight's ladder combo was nerfed into the ground. In other words, there was a 0 to death combo that Meta Knight had at the time, and while it was very hard to get off, it pushed Meta Knight into the peak of the meta, so that would probably explain why this person was playing Meta Knight. Anyway, I managed to win game 1 because these matches are best of 3. And of course I'm using my old faithful Pac-Man. And my opponent was visibly upset and went to the tournament organizer and requested to change setups mid-match because apparently that TV that we were using had too much lag. And so apparently he just couldn't play against me. He was playing in too much lag. Even though I was playing in the exact same amount of lag. The thing is, my practice setup was a monitor, which did not have a lot of lag on it. So I'm not used to lag either. Yet I won game 1 by a decent amount, actually. My opponent was clearly tilted, so wanted a different setup. We go to a different setup, and I win game 2, and this person's mad at this point. Gives the frustrated GG and walks off. And I can remember at some point after that, I was informed by some friends of mine that this person had some choice words about, I guess, me and the whole event in general. And I remember thinking it was so weird to me that someone would get so upset about a game that their view of another person would become negative because of their experience facing them in a tournament bracket. And of course, they're playing a meta character at the time. I'm playing garbage. Like, Little Mac is about the only character worse. So I was playing a really bad character and I won 2-0. I guess in that way it does make sense why they would be upset, because when you pick a meta character, you expect to have a competitive advantage and still end up losing. That's a way to trip up your ego pretty good. But it was such an odd moment for me. And of course, this was back in the Wii U days of Smash Bros, so clearly a long time ago at this point. But as time has progressed, and I have played more games online instead of in person, I've started to come across a lot more people like that, where they get really upset about things not being ideal for them in a gaming environment. Which, as someone who has rarely ever had an ideal circumstance, it's such a foreign concept to me to expect so much out of a game, that things have to be perfect and fair and balanced for you, and every little piece has to work properly, otherwise the game's bad or my opponent's bad. Of course, blame everything else but yourself. But over time, I've noticed that kind of mentality has become much more prevalent in the gaming community, where this addictive need for optimization and fairness has started to kind of overrun the minds of people. And games went from you just play the game because you like it to playing the game because you have to win at it because, I don't know, social status maybe. At this point, it's kind of hard to tell the reason why a lot of people still play games, because clearly a lot of people don't enjoy playing the games that they play. I don't know how you vent frustrations when the game makes you frustrated. But I've also noticed that this kind of mentality has grown alongside the increase in competition, which that kind of makes sense. When you care more about winning, you would clearly get more frustrated if you don't win. So the importance of winning in a game, especially a PvP game, has been increasing over the years, and especially during the pandemic, it just exploded, it seems like. But what also started to explode is cheating in PvP games, which brings us to today, where there's so many cheaters on Apex that a lot of these streamers and influencers have just given up. And while I don't have any peer-reviewed research papers to prove this point I'm about to make, I would argue that there is a correlation between the increase in the competitive nature and culture surrounding PvP games and the increase in cheating. This is not the first time I've talked about cheating in a video before, as well as competition kind of getting in the way of a good game sometimes. But I'm starting to see my theory play out in real time in Apex, and I stopped playing that game. That's why you're not seeing background footage of it. But I'm very curious if the entirety of my theory actually does play out to the fullest extent, which if it does, that's a problem. Because listen, I don't want to be correct on this in the slightest. And again, this is not a very fact-based idea. This is based on my experience dealing with competitive scenes and seeing the progression of competition in games over time, because I've been in it a while, I've seen shifts in how people view competitive gaming, and it's significant. And I've played a variety of different genres. So I've played World of Tanks, Pokemon Unite, which is a MOBA. That was absolutely terrible. Obviously, Smash Bros. Was a fighting game. Played Apex, don't know how that's a competitive game, but apparently Battle Royales are competitive now. Still don't understand that. And I've played Pokemon Gen 8 and Gen 9. I've played the latter for both of those, which is a competitive format. So I've played a decent chunk of competitive games, even if it's not the peak uber sweaty ones. No, wait. Unite and Apex are both pretty sweaty games. Just because any game that's a MOBA is going to be sweaty. So, I've played a decent chunk of games that can be reasonably competitive, and I have engaged in the competitive activities of them. But I've also checked out the communities around them. And while yes, every game has a different community around it, I noticed a general theme among the competitive players. And that is they tend to have a general disregard for fun. And I know that seems harsh, but that is just the way it has turned into. I mean, back 10 years ago, sure, people played the good character because they wanted to win. But nowadays, it seems like people, before they even touch a game, they want to know what the meta is immediately, day one. And that's the only thing they pick, because they would rather not waste their time with an inferior playstyle. And that type of mentality is absolutely foreign to me. Now, I may pick something out of comfort, but even games that have a lot more interesting and diverse options, there are so many people that just want a shortcut to what's best, and that's all they care about. Just give me the best option, and I will use that, and I will never touch any other part of the game, ever. And most of the competitive people that I see and interact with online think that way. There's very few that actually pick a character or option because they think it's fun and want to take the time to optimize that option specifically. So my view of how to play a game competitively, that used to be not super common, but fairly common, has become nearly extinct, it seems. And depending on the game you play, the other competitive players that are now the majority think that you're trolling if you don't pick a meta option. Apparently League has an issue with that, where you'll get banned for picking the wrong character. But as this mentality has become more prevalent, where the meta becomes the only focus, it seems like cheating has grown alongside of it. And I've made this statement before, but I think there's a correlation between that level of meta blind mentality and the increase in cheating. And I think Apex is really starting to feel the effects of that. It's still a very popular game, yes, but at one point, 30% of the Master and Predator players were banned in a massive ban wave. 30%. So 1 in 3 of your top players were cheaters. Those aren't your casuals that can't keep up with the good players, so they grab an aimbot to just be at the same level as them. That's your good players, your competitive players, the ones that care so much about winning. They're the ones using aimbot now. 1 in 3. That's a significant number. That's a huge number. And I think this highlights the problem with viewing a game so competitively. I remember towards the end of when I stopped playing Apex, trying to just play the game chill doesn't work. Like, it stopped working. And that could be because that game has a very silly matchmaker in it that is trying to hit that balance of keeping you just frustrated enough without being too frustrated, so that you'll keep playing the game at the highest amount possible. At least it feels like that's how the MM is. But so many times, even just playing in pubs, I couldn't catch a break, and most of the people that I play against were just so much better than me. Now, every so often I could outplay them because I think creatively. And when you think creatively, you can outpace sweats kind of easily because they're so linear. And it can make you look like you're higher skilled than you actually are. It's really just that you're thinking and they're not. But I got tired of it. There was not a single casual mode in that game. Everything was tense. Everything was, well, sweaty. So far, my experience with X-Defiant has not been that. It has actually been a lot more chill. So there is at least that going for X-Defiant, even if it's so bland. But of course it would be the one that feels super sweaty, that has all the cheaters on it. And let's look at another example that seems to have a lot of cheaters on it too. So what about the finals? Now, it's kind of a weird format, because apparently the competitive mode features 3 teams for some reason. But that had a big cheating problem too. And obviously, the free-to-play games are the ones that are the most likely to end up with all these cheaters in it. But when you consider the amount of money that people put into cheating, I'm pretty sure that even if the game costs $10, people would still cheat on it a lot. But that's another sweaty game that also had a huge cheating problem, probably still does. But I talk about Apex the most because that's the one I know the most about. But the more I see it decline, even though the numbers don't suggest it's declining, because it's still insanely popular, but the decline in player integrity, I think, can be correlated to how sweaty the game is. Not so much that casual players can't keep up so they get aimbot. That's what I used to think. And I am still sure there's some people that do that. What I started to notice towards the end of that is the cheaters I ran up against, they were actually really good at the game. Many years ago when you encountered a cheater in a game, they were clueless. They didn't know what the game was about, didn't understand the mechanics, that's why they were cheating. Nowadays, cheaters do know the mechanics. A lot of them are very good, sometimes pros. So you're just getting outmatched in multiple areas, and it's an entirely unfair scenario. At least with casual troll cheaters, you could outplay them sometimes, because they weren't very good. But more and more, it seems like the only people that cheat are the ones that care too much about winning. And they still pick the meta. It's not like they stop using the meta options because they're cheating now. And I've said this before in a previous video, but it looks as if cheating has become the next logical step of perfecting one's performance in a game. And I still think a lot of that has to do with people caring too much about winning and not enough about enjoying the game, not enough about the satisfaction of outplaying your opponent. I don't even think people care about outplaying their opponents anymore. I think people just care about the dub, and the way they go about achieving it doesn't matter anymore. People don't care if you win with a low tier. They care about how high your KD can be. It's that eternal number go up mentality, which you see a lot in the investment space. Apparently, it's quite common in the competitive gaming space too. Western culture has just become so saturated with stats, almost as if it's an addiction now. How big can the number be? How high can it go up? Or in the case of speedrunning, how low can it go? And I feel like that is coming at the cost of integrity and ethics. And you see this a lot with big companies that are publicly invested in. I mean, EA is a great example. You've seen how expensive some of those microtransactions can be, and how predatory they can be too. But even other companies not associated with gaming, like Adobe, I'm sure you've seen what they tried to get away with. People don't care about people anymore. It's like, because AI has become so prevalent, everyone thinks everyone's a bot now. So it doesn't matter how exploited they are, just as long as they keep the money machine going. The infinite money glitch of number go up. But I think in a similar vein, the competitive gaming community as a whole suffers a very similar thing, where too many people are focused on number go up, best optimization possible, ignore everything else about the game for number go up. Of course you're gonna become a cheater if you think like that, because it doesn't matter, because no part of the game matters to you. You're just playing for the numbers. You might as well be a robot at that point, which is what a lot of people do. They just let the aimbot do it for them. Oh wow, look at how big my number can get. And they don't have to aim train. I mean, sure, they may have to still learn out of position and stuff, and they still need to pick the weapon that has the best time to kill. So still have to play the meta, of course. It's a disease. This is a mental infection that has ruined a lot of good games. That's why I stopped playing World of Tanks. Yes, that game has terrible microtransactions and pay-to-win stuff, blah blah blah. But it was a fun game. Until they started catering so much to the competitive scene that they started to take away fun mechanics and turn the game into a sweat fest. Apex has had the same thing happen, with the charge rifle being removed, or it's effectively removed, as well as other just casual mechanics. The loot pools have become much more consistent across different areas, because for some reason a battle royale has to be competitive and fair and balanced. There's nothing fair and balanced about a battle royale when you can third-party people. That's inherently a non-competitive mechanic. But PvP games have become so bland because of the culture surrounding them has become so bland. It's just about numbers. That's all most people care about, which is why I have primarily been playing PvE games. Monster Hunter, for example. Numbers kinda matter sometimes, but it is far less important in that game. And the community feels the same way about it. Most of them don't really care that much about the numbers, and it makes for a much more engaging gaming environment when you have people that don't get so focused on the numbers that that's the only thing they play the game for. They actually play the game to have fun. But I think the PvP genre is dying. Not because people will stop playing PvP games. They may, by the numbers, become more popular than ever, as Apex kind of has become more popular than it ever has been. There's that weird dip, but I think it's going to go back up like it normally does. It's not that by the empirical data that these games are dying, as much as the actual community and integrity and ethics around the culture for these games. That is what's dying. Just like how megacorps could care less about their integrity and ethics as long as they can squeeze you out of every last dime. Apparently sweats are becoming the same thing. They don't care how unfair their advantage is, as long as they win. And I know not every sweat's like that. There are still some sweats that have integrity in them. I used to interact with a lot of them back in the day. But finding a sweat that isn't sold out to number go up is hard. And I'm so glad I've shifted away from PvP games, because no matter how exciting or grand or diverse a new game may be, it's always going to be overrun by those who just want the most optimal option possible, which is you pick the meta character and you run your aimbots, because that's the most optimal option possible. I don't like the way gaming is going, at least for PvP. PvE is great. Monster Hunter Wilds coming next year, that's probably going to be one of the best games ever made. Even just the older version, Monster Hunter World, I've been playing that a lot, and that's an excellent game. Just started playing Fallout 76 with my friend group. That's actually been a pretty fun experience too. Again, it's primarily PvE, and the players I have interacted with are generally quite generous, because the mentality of people playing a PvE game is so much healthier. And I've noticed that with Fallout, I've noticed that with Monster Hunter generally, and there's still the like overly sweaty people, but they're the minority in PvE games. Generally, people are so generous and care about other people in a PvE environment, whereas in the PvP games, the sweat has just overcome people's willingness to actually be nice and play fair. So I think the culture around all of that, it's ruining these games. Games that would otherwise be so much fun to play. Apex is a very fun game. It's a lot of really cool mechanics, but that's a cheater's game now, because it was a sweaty game. The sweaty games tend to be the ones that have the most cheating problems. In case you haven't noticed, you can take some games and do your own research and digging into that. But those are generally the targets for cheating, because that entire sweaty mentality, it's just gone too far. And we're starting to see the effects of late stage sweat culture, because it's quite clear cheating isn't going to go anywhere. It's a multi-billion-dollar business now. With that much money thrown around, there's no way you can get rid of it. But that is the way it is. I don't think there's necessarily a whole lot that can be done about it. I mean, you can start by making your own choices. And I know this is a bit theoretical, almost along the lines of fear-mongering, but that's the decline that I've seen with PvP as a whole. And it's probably the worst in FPS games, but other genres are affected as well, where a game either becomes so salt and pepper because all of the fun mechanics get basically deleted because sweats don't like it, when a casual player dare have an option to counterplay against them in their sweaty optimal way to play. How dare they? And then there's the other games where it's like, it will have some of that, but it'll also have cheaters and just a whole bunch of them. So yeah, PvP games are just, they bring out the worst in people, don't they? And they seem to attract the worst people too. So yeah, my days of even being remotely associated to sweating is over. Has been for a while. I just don't think it's worth it anymore. Not with the progression of sweat culture. It just ruins games for me now. So I'll just play PvE. I'll probably still play X Defiant with the boys every so often, because in moderation, a PvP game can still be pretty fun, but I'm definitely not taking any PvP game past that point anymore. But if you enjoyed this theoretical, philosophical rant, then maybe consider leaving a comment. Or if you didn't like it, also leave a comment. You can tell me how wrong I am, because I'm pretty sure I am to some people. But that's the thing when you have an opinion. You're always going to be wrong to somebody. Anyway, thank y'all so much for watching. I'm probably going to go back to just generic Monster Hunter content and just have a good time with it. I don't intend to do many more of these style videos, but I did want to get at least this one out. And maybe I'll keep track of how competitive games continue to decline over time. We'll see. But for now, I am transitioning to Monster Hunter, and I'm probably going to be there for a while. Anyway, I will see y'all next time.